I kind of want to start off talking about 5 words that describe me. And then I want to get into the essence of what we're talking about today. So next slide, one of the first words that describe me, to tell you a little bit more about me, is that I am a blurred. I don't know how many of you have ever heard that term blurred, but a blurred just means they're a black nerd. Like, I collect comic books, I read comic books, I watch anime, I go to the movies, I play video games. I've been in video game tournaments. I've won a few video game tournaments. So I love all things that categorize as nerds. So you're probably going to hear some references this morning. Next slide. The next word that would describe me would be educator. Before I took this role at Clemson University, I was actually an anatomy and physiology professor at a local college. So I take education very seriously. My nickname was the professor. It led to me starting 2 YouTube channels that had somewhere around 700,000 views, all about just teaching people how to learn. Let's go to the next term. Some people refer to me as a thought leader. Now, a thought leader can mean a lot of different things. What I personally feel that being a thought leader is about is that it is my calling to challenge you in the way that you think to instigate change in your life. And literally, that is what I'm going to be doing with you today. That image right there is from me running a TEDx Greenville a couple of years ago. So whether it's giving a TED Talk or whether it's here speaking with you, I always want to challenge the way that people think. And the last term, next slide, is a scientist. Like Ms. Rashonda mentioned, I do have 2 degrees from Clemson. I'm working on a 3rd. Yeah, I know, you can't get enough, right? I'm working on a PhD, and that's actually a picture of me in my lab, up to shenanigans. When you're in there late at night and you're by yourself, you tend to do a lot of silly things. But a scientist is what I aspire to also be able to do, and a scientist is what I am. So let's go to the next slide. All right. This is what we're going to get into today. No, I'm not going to be talking about Sesame Street, but it does give me a launching point to kind of get into the essence of what we're doing today. If you notice the title of what my talk was about, it was called Leading in Color, and it was talking about leadership tips for minority leaders, as well as leaders who are allies to minorities. This image is kind of an explanation of my upbringing. I was constantly surrounded by a diverse environment. I had all types of different people from all types of different backgrounds at all times during my life. However, I started to notice something. You know, life's a lot better. Well, I wouldn't say better. Life's a lot easier, or at least it appears to be, when people like you. You know what I mean? It's like, things just seem to be easier when people like you. And when I figured out that things were better for me or easier for me when people liked me, I kind of enjoyed that, you know? And I started also noticing something else, that when you were in charge, if you're the leader, I started noticing when I was growing up that whoever was the leader wasn't always liked. So what I started doing was I started avoiding leadership. Let's go to the next slide. I'm gonna show you how I felt growing up. In the next slide, this is how I was. I was just like this Drake meme. I was like, yo, be the leader? Nah, that's all right. Let somebody else do it? Yeah, that's what's up. That's just how I was coming along, because I did not want the responsibility of being the leader, because, hey, being the leader meant that people didn't like you, and I just was not feeling that. But when I got to high school, when I got to the end of middle school, beginning of high school, I started noticing something. I started noticing that I didn't like the way people led. And what I mean by that is I started noticing that people were prejudiced with the way that they led. I started noticing that some of the leaders that I was working with treated people differently based on the color of their skin or their religion or where they lived or who their parents were. I started noticing that instead of making things better, we would just do the same thing over and over and over again. And it started draining me. Then it got to the point where people started following me, whether I wanted to be the leader or not. And that happened when I got into 4-H and when I got into FFA. And so ultimately on the next slide, it tells you exactly why I started getting into leadership, because I wanted change. Let's go to the next slide. So the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to leadership is this. Leadership is influence, and influence is power. Leadership is influence, and influence is power. Anybody who's read any leadership books, you've probably heard that leadership is influence. Leadership has very little to do with how fancy you are. It has very little to do with titles. It's all about how you can inspire other people to do other things. That's what leadership is. I know I've got Kim Kardashian over there to the left. I got Captain America up there to the right. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I don't think that either one of them are leaders. But believe it or not, as long as the two of them have an influence over people, and as long as the things that they do influence people to do other things and make changes, they are leaders, plain and simple. So I think that's pretty basic. I'm pretty sure this crowd has this down pat. But the next part is what I want to get into. Influence is power. Because influence causes things to move. And when you study physics, something that causes things to move is power. This is why people fight over leadership positions. This is why people argue over leadership positions. This is why you have one group on one side of the aisle, one group on the other side of the aisle. This is where arguments start. This is where people separate. This is where we begin to break into groups rather than come together and work in unity. Because people fight over leadership because they want power. And as a leader, you have to understand something. Even if you get into leadership because it's all about the people, even if you say, Julian, it's all good, man. I'm not worried about being in power. I'm not worried about getting anything out of leadership. You still need to understand that other people around you view that leadership position as one of power. Now, the good news is it is one of power. So it empowers you to be able to bring change to your community, to your clubs, and to the life around you. It allows you to be able to be empowered to bring change to the nation and to the world. And yes, I did say that, to the world. Let's go to the next slide. I never lose. I either win or I learn. I'm going to say that again. I never lose. I either win or I learn. These are words by the great and late Nelson Mandela. I wish that I had picked up these words when I was a lot younger. Unfortunately, I picked up these words when I was a lot older. When I think of these words, I actually think of my father, which you see in the picture over to the left, in that left picture. My dad, if you ever got a chance to meet him, he was a great father, great husband, great uncle, great mentor. He was just a great man all around, known for his integrity, a man that said what he meant and meant what he said. However, if you got to know my father a little while, you would also get to know that he was also the dude over there in the picture to the right. My dad was retired military, 101st Airborne, Army Ranger, Special Forces. He was every bit of that dude that was in that comic book that you see over there to the right. He was a tough guy. And one day he would tell me about a story. He said, son, a lot of the missions that I would go on would be life or death missions. And he told me about this one mission where his recon team paired up with the Navy SEALs. And I don't know if you know anything about Navy SEALs, but those are some seriously bad dudes. And my dad was like, man, that was the first time I had ever really met and worked with Navy SEALs before. And he said, we arrived at the place where we were going to launch this mission. And he said, one of the Navy SEALs, one of the bigger ones, they jumped out of a boat. His foot landed in a hole and it broke his knee. He said his knee buckled. I was like, ooh. I said, so what did they do? Did they put him back on the boat? He said, no. I just looked at my dad and I was like, no. Dude broke his knee at the beginning of the mission. Why didn't he go back? He said, no. He said they got him on the beach. They took out 3 syringes. They injected stuff into his knee. He wrapped it up. He picked up his weapon. He picked up his pack and said, let's go. And he carried out the entire mission on one knee. One. I was like, that is insane. He said, yeah, but it changed my mindset because this guy lost his knee at the beginning of the mission and he finished the mission with just one knee. He said, I had to keep that in mind because I would go through more and more situations like that where it will be life or death situations. And he said, this is the thing you have to remember. When you lose, you quit. But when you learn, you change. I want you to think about what I just said. When you lose, you quit. When you learn, you change. And that was something that was very key for my father because he said by him not looking at mistakes as being losing, he didn't quit in his mind. And because he didn't quit in his mind, at the times where he found himself in life or death situations, he was able to push forward so that he could survive and bring his men home alive. And that's very key for us as leaders as well. If you begin to look at situations, instead of saying, man, I caught an L, instead say, nah, I caught a learn. I'm going to learn from that situation. I'm going to learn and I'm going to change and I'm going to adapt. Because if you're going to be an engineer, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you can't look at it as, hey, I lost. You got to look at it as, hey, I learned from that. Because it begins to change your mindset and it makes sure that you don't quit. Next slide. All right. This might hurt a few feelings, so let me get ready. I'll give you my email if you want to rebuttal me later on this. Do not save everybody. This is not a request. This is a mandate. If you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be a leader of color, if you're going to be a leader who is an ally of people of color, do not save everybody. Because if you attempt to save everybody, you are going to run out of gas. Instead of trying to save everybody, I want you to do something different. I want you to understand Superman and Lois Lane. All right? I read a comic issue one time and it was quite hilarious. The issue was where Superman flew in to save the entire city. And in the process of trying to save the city, someone pulled out some kryptonite. And so when he pulled out the kryptonite on Superman, Superman started dying. And at that moment, just when Superman was about to die, Lois Lane shows up. Lois Lane picks up the kryptonite, puts it in a box, and walks away. So the very thing that was killing Superman, the dude who is capable of saving the entire planet, is taken out by a glowing green rock, and a person with no superpowers whatsoever was able to rescue Superman. Now, I want to break that story down to you because there are actually 3 things that you need to remember if you're not going to save everybody. Number 1, you're either going to save people. Number 2, you're either going to support people. Or number 3, you're going to be silent. Now, before you go crazy and you're like, wait a minute, this is nuts. Why? What are you talking about? Let me explain. If you save people, you need to make sure that whatever you're going all in on, you truly understand, and that is what you stand for. Sometimes you can't save everybody. Sometimes you have to support people. I'll give you an example. So I had a friend, and that guy was my friend, okay? And I supported my friend, but I didn't agree with the group my friend was with. There were some different people in that group who had done some different things that I did not agree with. And that it could look kind of bad if I supported this person's group. It would not be well because I'm be honest with you, I personally did not agree with the group, but I agreed with my friend. So I said, you know what? I can't march with you about this. I can't go on TV with you about this. I can't post this on my social media, but I can support you because you are my friend. So I can support you. And there's different ways that I can support you. What do you need? And he said, you know what? I actually don't need you to save my group. I just need a safe place where I can come talk to somebody about what I'm dealing with. I said, fine. I said, perfect. I will support you on that. Another thing that is there is if you're not saving somebody and you are supporting somebody, sometimes it's best to be silent. And when you're silent, what you're doing is you're not being silent because you're not taking a side. You're silent because you're observing, you're listening, and you're watching, because you may not know as much about the situation as you think. So I'll give you an example of when to be silent. There was a gentleman that all of my friends wanted to endorse. And I said, I think we should get to know more about this guy before we endorse him. They said, sure, okay, we can do that. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to endorse this guy. You can be silent. Well, 10 minutes before a church service, this guy was in the parking lot punching his daughter. Like literally 10 minutes before the church service, he's in a parking lot and he is punching his daughter in broad daylight, 6:50 p.m. There happened to be 2 police officers in the parking lot at the church and pull him off of the daughter. They had already made a commercial for this guy. The commercial had already run and everything went down the tubes. What they didn't know was that he had a problem with physical and verbal abuse. And we had already promoted this guy for a Father of the Month. So had we just been silent a little bit and had really gotten to know this guy a lot better, we wouldn't have been in the trouble and the shenanigans that we had been in. As a leader, you're going to be called to endorse and support and save a lot of people. And you're going to have to make a hard decision as to when you're going to save, when you're going to support, and when you are going to be silent. Let's go to the next one. All right. Adversity is your friend. Easy is your enemy. How are you doing? Because this is some heavy stuff that we're dropping on you first thing in the morning. Is everybody good? Y'all good? You can drop good if you're good. Just want to know. Adversity is your friend. Easy is your enemy. Let me explain this just a little bit. There's a reason why I have this barn that's sitting here, and I need to explain this just a little bit. Several years ago, I was walking through some land that my family owns in Sumter, South Carolina. So if anybody's from the Midlands, Sumter, Manning, Wedgefield, Rembert, Columbia, South Carolina, word up. Nice to see y'all. I was in Sumter and I'm walking this land and I discovered an old barn. And we said that we were going to, 803. We discovered this old barn and we were going to restore this old barn. So I went out to this barn. I was by myself. There were some things that I wanted to work on in the upper portion of the barn. And while I was up in the upper portion of the barn, the support of the upper portion of the barn gave way. It fell out. And of course, with the support falling out from this barn, I fell as well. And I landed on a wooden stake that was sticking up on the bottom floor. And that wooden stake impaled me. It stabbed me in my side. The only reason that it didn't go all the way through me is because my ribs actually stopped it from going all the way through. So I fell from the second part of the barn. The wood went into my side, stabbed me, knocked me over, and I actually blacked out for a little while. When I came to, I found myself lying in the mud in the bottom of this barn. It started raining, started storming. I'm lying in this barn. No one knows where I am. I'm quite a ways from my grandmother's house. I'm alone and I'm bleeding. And I don't know how long I've been bleeding. I just turn my head and look over in the mud. There's blood running in the mud. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm having trouble breathing. Of course, I've been stabbed through the side of my chest. And I'm thinking to myself, am I going to die here? I can't even get up. I'm in so much pain. And while I'm lying there, I start to focus. I start to recenter my mind. And this did not happen by accident. Years prior, I had the opportunity to participate in a survival simulation. And in survival simulation, what they do is they take you out literally in the middle of nowhere. They drop you off for a week. They give you the only thing you can carry out there is what can fit in a Ziploc bag. So they take you out in the middle of nowhere. They let you take this Ziploc bag with supplies in it, and they tell you to survive for a week. And by being out there, I had to sleep in the rain. I had to sleep in freezing cold. I ate squirrel for the first time. Tastes like chicken. I used rocks as pillows. That was the first time I had ever slept on the ground, and unfortunately had things that lived in the woods and stuff try to crawl in and sleep with you. It was crazy. It was nuts. But I made it. I actually survived the entire week. Fast forward to when I was in the bottom of this barn, I started thinking back to the survival tips that I had learned. I started thinking about how to refocus my mind when I was in the middle of adversity. I started thinking about how much pain I was in and how to use pain psychologically as fuel to push you past the pain so that you could survive. And slowly and painfully, I was able to get myself off of the ground and take the long, shuddering, stuttering walk in the pouring down rain back to my grandmother's house to get medical attention. I'm not sure what would have happened to me if I had laid there any longer. Maybe I would have survived. Maybe someone would have shown up to find me. But I'm pretty sure that what happened to me probably medically would have been a lot worse than it was. And sometimes, even now, when I think about what's happening to me, and when I think about what I'm going through, and I think about COVID-19, and I think about George Floyd, sometimes I'll catch myself taking my hand and rubbing my side because I still have that scar. And it reminds me that adversity is your friend. When you go through hard times, adversity becomes your friend. And these friends help you when you encounter more adversity. Easy is unfortunately your enemy, because easy does not show up when you go through hard times. Easy is not going to be there telling you that you should push forward. Easy is going to tell you, hey, it was a lot better back then. Adversity or past adversity tells you, hey, you know what? You've been through worse. Or better yet, you've been through all of that. You can make it through this. You've got this. You can do this. And you need that as a leader, because a lot of leaders spend time alone. And it's not because you're a lonely person and you don't have friends. You just find yourself in certain situations where you are leading alone. And you need adversity to be your friend, because easy can be your enemy. Next slide. Race is not what you think, but it matters. When you get done today, what I want everybody to do, not right now, but later on today, I want you to go to, and I'll type this in, I want you to go to pbs.org, and I want you to look up the 3-part series called Race, the Power of an Illusion. It's on pbs.org. You may have to get your 4-H leaders to maybe find out if someone can download it or get access to it. Maybe we can all watch it together sometime in the future. But Race, the Power of Illusion explains to you where race actually came from. Believe it or not, the majority of the time that humans have existed on this planet, we didn't use race. We said that people were from different empires, they were from different continents, but we didn't use race. Race is actually not that old. Just a group of individuals got together and they said, hey, we want to have power over people. We want to have power and influence. How do we justify having power and influence? Well, we're going to create a hierarchy based on the color of your skin. And that way we can be on top and these other people can be below. And that's how race was created. So race is not what you think. It's actually what we call a social construct. It's something that some people made up. However, race matters. And there's two reasons why race matters. And as a leader, especially during this year and during this time, why you have to make sure that you remember that race matters. Number one is because race is a part of how our American system works. Now, unfortunately, because it's in the system of how our nation works, humans, and I do mean humans, all of us, have now began to divide people based on their race. And you can see it throughout history. We say that Black people act this way. We say that white people act this way. We see that Hispanic people and Latino people act this way. We say that Chinese act this way. And we break everybody down based on a race. When in fact, science has already proven that we are 99.9% genetically the same, except for our house paint. That's it. Which means that I can find a person of just about any color that acts in a good way or in a negative way. So as a leader, you have to keep in mind that race is an identifier. We do use race in identification. Some of us have been saying, you know what, this is kind of old. Can we get rid of it now? But at the same time, our society also breaks people down into race. That's why we call it racism. That's why we call it systemic racism. It's policies, procedures, thought processes, and things that we do that disadvantage other people based on the race that they identify by. And it exists, and it's here, and we're seeing it even now. And this is not something new. It's something very old. Next slide. Know the difference between urgent and important. Miss Rashonda actually knows the guy that I'm about to talk about. Miss Rashonda, I'm about to talk about Rodney Johnson. So there was this guy that we used to work with named Rodney Johnson. My nickname for him was Superman, because the dude just was like practically like Superman. He did everything great, and he was a pretty awesome guy. And I walked in his office, and if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what he had on his office wall one day. It was this quadrant. And I was like, Rodney, what is this? This is weird. He said, it's my urgent and important quadrant. I said, how does that thing work? He said, well, it's what allows me to get everything done. It allows me to keep from being overwhelmed. In other words, if I need to figure out everything that comes into my life, I need to be able to say whether it's urgent or whether it's important or whether it's both or whether it's neither. I said, well, walk me through this quadrant. He said, sure. If something is urgent, that means it's on a time limit. That means that if I don't do it, something negative is going to happen quite soon. So if it's urgent and it's something important, which if it's important, it just means it's something that means something to me. So if it's urgent and it's important, it's something that I should do right now. If it's not urgent, but I feel it's important to me, it's something I care about, then I just need to plan. I need to plan out. I need to put it on a calendar and do it some other time. I don't need to worry about it or freak out about it or lose time spazzing out about it. I just need to plan to get it done at some point in time. If it's urgent and needs to be done in a short period of time, but it's not really all that important to me, then I can delegate. I can find somebody else to do it. I can find something else to do it. And if it's not urgent and it's not important, then I need to ask myself real quick, why in the ham sandwich am I worried about it? Why am I even trying to do it? I might need to eliminate that and remove that off my plate. And I've been having to go back to this quadrant during COVID-19 because I'm stuck at home, and that means that my time is even more valuable than it has been before. So for example, today, when we're done with this conference, I still have more meetings, more webinars, and more things and more stuff that I have to do today. And some of those things are actually urgent. Like I have a very important thing that I have to do at 2 o'clock today. It's urgent and it's important. So you know what? It's going in the do box. However, there are some things that I need for the house. They're not urgent. If I don't get them today, I could always go get it tomorrow. As a matter of fact, I could wait till this weekend to go get it. So it's not urgent, but it is important. So I'm going to put it in box number 2, and I'm going to plan to go pick it up from the drop-off spot at the store on Friday afternoon when I get done from work. There's a couple of things that I kind of want. Actually, there's a couple of things that I need, but they're not urgent. I mean, the world's not going to end if I don't get it. And really, I kind of need them by this weekend. So I guess they're not important, but they are urgent because I do need them by this weekend. So I'm going to go on Amazon and I'm going to order them. I'm going to delegate someone else to get those items to me. So I'm just going to use Amazon to get it instead of trying to figure out how I'm going to get to a store, because I need to stay home as much as possible. And if something's not urgent and not important, I'm going to have to eliminate it. So, you know, I kind of wanted some butter pecan ice cream, but it's not urgent. It's not really that important. So I guess I won't worry about going to try to figure out how to get butter pecan ice cream today. Maybe I'll try to figure out how to order that from the grocery store tomorrow. Next slide. I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this slide, but we don't have that much time left. So I'm going to make this really quick. For those of you who watch anime, you're bound to have watched Dragon Ball Z at some point in time. So the picture over to the left kind of makes a little bit of sense. It shows the evolution of the main character known as Goku. Goku is actually defined by all of the adversity and things that he's gone through over his life. One of my favorite episodes of Dragon Ball Z is when he was talking to somebody about how the different things that he's gone through and the different people he's fought are what allowed him to increase in power level. He talks about the time he fought Vegeta. He talks about the time he fought Cell. He talks about the time he fought Frieza. He talks about the androids. He talks about all these different times that he fought, but how those moments made him a stronger person every time. One of my favorite pictures, which I'm going to find a way to put this on my wall in my office whenever we go back to our offices, is the picture to the right. Not saying that Goku isn't one of my favorite pictures, because that's going in my office too. But the picture over to the right is a young man who just graduated from high school this year. And what he did was, during the protests in Minneapolis, he went out and took his cap and gown and stood out on the corner during the protests and took this photo. And the reason why he took this photo is because he said he did not want to forget this year. This year was going to define the way he moved forward after his high school graduation. He felt that if he could survive this year, that he could survive anything. And I want all of you to remember that as a leader. One of our problems that we deal with a lot of times is that as a leader, you're always going and going and going. But as leaders, we can't afford to forget. We can't afford to forget what adversities and what we just led people through, because that's going to build us to our next victory later on. And when you forget what you've been through, you're more likely to repeat the mistakes that you made again in the future. So we need to be learning about what we're going through right now as a nation. We need to be learning what we're going through right now as a state, because we're only halfway through the year and we have a whole nother half to go. And this situation in this year has made it very clear that what we need is we need a lot more leadership. Well, that's all I got. If you go to the next slide, that's my last slide. Shows you how to get in contact with me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. I probably spend more time on Instagram and LinkedIn than the other two. I pretty much use Twitter as my news feed, and I kind of use Facebook to keep up with what different groups are doing. But if you contact me on any one of those, I'll reach back to you. And of course, if you hit me up on email, I got you. Hope something helped you today. That's all we got. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Nixon. Now, you guys, it is time for Q&A. So feel free to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself if you want to ask your question in person, live, or you can also go ahead and drop them off in the chat right now. So I'm looking in the chat. I'll start off with the questions. Earlier, Mr. Nixon, you talked about how to be a leader. You talked about support or being silent, or, but right now in social media, it is so hard to practice the silence piece because everybody is screaming so loud. So as a youth leader, and as an adult as well, like, how can we practice being silent? Like, how can we develop that skill of knowing when we don't have to talk and not feeling pressured by social media to talk?
That is a great question. So let me tackle that real quick. One thing that we all need to remember as leaders is that when you're silent, you're silent, but it's an active silence. So, like, for example, when someone posts something on social media that is really negative and it's offensive, or better yet, if someone posts some statistics and they use it in a bad way, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out where that information came from, which requires research. Copy and paste what they said into Google and see what pops up. Look for the real information. That's being active. So you're actually being silent by not responding yet, but you're researching to find out where this information came from. So if you do choose to respond, you're responding with the truth. Sometimes I'll see somebody say something and I say, that's really wrong. Well, instead of telling them that's incorrect, you're wrong, you're a terrible person, I go and I research to see where they got that from. And if I find out that the statistics that they have posted were incorrect, I will find a credible source, credible source, a trusted source. And I will come back and I will post that to them. Sometimes I send it to them privately and say, hey, I saw where you posted this. Have you seen this? And I'll post that there. And what I found is sometimes they'll turn around. Well, sometimes they don't even respond back. They don't say anything. But sometimes they'll read it and they'll say, oh, okay, you're right. I don't agree, but I understand. And they'll stand down. If the person who made the post is somebody that's actually better. Because if it's somebody you may be able to engage them in conversation. Hey, I noticed that you made this post on Tuesday and it said this. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you said what you did? And you say it just like that. You don't jump in, you don't go all in on them. You just have them explain where they're coming from about it. Because sometimes people make posts, and unfortunately, a lot of people make posts on social media out of emotion. They just do. They're not thinking about what they're saying, but what they're saying is a feeling. So it is how they felt at that time, but they haven't really put a lot of thought into it. So your conversation with them gives you an opportunity to let them take a step back and think about what they said. And now you can have a conversation about what they should have said. And they now get a chance to say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have said that after all. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Ms. Rashonda.
No, that was so good. That was so good. We have another great question in our group chat from Jeremiah. He said, how do you deal with people who may bombard you with questions that you don't have an answer for yet, but you would like to voice your opinion at that time or in the appropriate time? So I guess you can start with the first question of how do you deal with people who bombard you with questions that you don't have an answer for?
Okay. So working on my PhD, I've had to learn a very hard lesson. You have to admit when you don't know. Number two, you have to make the conscious, honest effort to find out. So like if you ask me a question, if you say, hey, Mr. Nixon, how does this equation work? I'm going to tell you, you know what? I'm sorry, Jeremiah, I don't know, but I can find out. Now I need to make an active attempt to figure out the answer to that question. If you don't have all the answers when people first hit you up with questions, don't feel bad, even if they ask stank. Even if they get a little salty with you just because you don't have all the answers, don't worry about it. People are more likely to trust you when you do take the time and the effort to find the correct answer. It's more important, and it goes better towards your integrity as a leader and your rep. It goes way better for your rep if you come back to people with credible, trustworthy answers rather than just flying off something off the hip and just having something to say. And so that's one of the most important things that you can do. Make sure you research, make sure you find out. Don't be afraid to tell people, hey, I don't know the answer to that right now, but I can go find out. And what happens is, as you continue to do that, people will say, well, when he says that, that means he's actually going to go get me a good answer. So I'll be patient. I'll wait. Now, there was a second part to your question, right?
Yes, it comes back. How do you use your how?
But you would like to voice your opinion at the time. Yeah. Say that again. My internet just got a little fuzzy.
Jeremiah, you might have to unmute yourself just to clarify, but the last part it says, but you would like to voice your opinion at that time, but it's not a question. So Jeremiah, would you like to unmute yourself to ask that?
Sure. My question was just sort of like, if you're having a conversation with someone and there are other people around you and you're asking a question and you're talking back and forth, but they start to bombard you with questions that you don't have answers for, how would you answer that so you don't, look like you don't know anything, but, you still want to answer them and give them an answer like in the moment?
Okay. Yeah. Well, then in that case, and first of all, Jeremiah, thank you for your question. Because that is a question that is a very common question people have. And a lot of people want to know that. So it goes back to what I originally said. You have to let them know, hey, you know what? That's a lot of questions, and I'm going to need time to answer those questions. Give me some time to go back and research that, and when I find some answers. That lets them know that you're taking what they're saying seriously. If they don't want to have a conversation after that, they don't care what answers you find later, then they probably didn't really want an answer. They probably really just wanted to argue with you. And what you'll find being useful information, what you find is you have to just drop argument and let bygones be bygones. But if they really want the answer, they'll wait.
All right, and we have one final question, and I want to make sure that I'm saying this right. So, David, you might have to unmute yourself to explain steamroll, but it says, how do you deal with people who try to steamroll you? But I'm not sure what steamroll is. So, David, feel free to unmute yourself to clarify your question.
Steamrolling is just basically trying to like go over you.
So like, is it when they try to just shout you down, kind of like, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at you all at once?
Basically.
Yeah. Okay. That's a verbal fight. That's an argument. And when you're dealing with somebody like that, I hate to say it, but when you're dealing with someone like that, you take a step back, you take a deep breath, and you listen. Because sometimes when people rapid fire like that, you're the first person to actually listen. They're actually throwing all that stuff and all those emotions at you because unfortunately, you're the first person to actually pay attention to their pain. I had a friend that called me and he said, Julian, do you have time to stay on the phone? It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, I was about to go to bed, but yeah, I can stay on the phone. He said, okay, cool. Because I have a friend and she's about to jump off of a bridge. I said, whoa, wait, time out. Hold up, dog. She's about to what? And he's like, yeah, she's about to jump off of a bridge and I don't know where she is. I need your help. I'm going to put you on three-way. So he puts us on three-way, and she's shouting all kinds of things at me. And so I just sit there on the phone and I'm listening. And I realize that she's been holding in about 2 years worth of pain, but she just needed someone just to listen to her. And I literally listened to her for like 2 hours and came to realize that it was not personal. It wasn't personal. I was just someone to actually listen to her. Now, long story short, we got her some help and she got off of that bridge and she's living perfectly fine now. But a lot of times when people are throwing all that at you, they feel like they're not being heard and you're that one person to listen. And listen, don't listen to reply. Actually listen to ask more questions. As they're shouting things at you, you may say, it sounds like you're really, really angry. You said something there a minute ago about you hate your parents. Do you really? Can you tell me more about your parents? And what you'll start noticing is the conversation will start to change. It starts going from them attacking you to them talking to you to them trusting you. And we need a lot more of that now, more than ever. So, Ms. Rivers, I hope that kind of helped you out a little bit.